Greetings, programs, and welcome to the latest edition of the Awesome Friday Movie Podcast, the only podcast where we discuss two things every week. I say only because it's only me and Simon. My name is Matthew, and Simon is with me. Say hi, Simon.
Hello. What a pleasure it is to be back in your company. Yes, we are literally the only podcast that talks about movies. So if you see others advertised, just ignore them because they're not ours.
Well, no, it's the only podcast where you and I talk about movies. Except for the times we've ever guest starred on any other podcast. Which of course
is really fun. It's really fun. It's really, really fun being someone at the position I am in my life now is that I managed to squeeze in like half an hour of a movie a night before I pass out. One of the movies we're talking about this week, I actually took 3 attempts to watch it because I kept passing out. The other one, I stayed awake and on the edge of my seat for the whole thing. So maybe that's indicative of their relative quality. But I do enjoy...
I mean, good Simon. Now we don't have to do the podcast anymore.
But I do, when we sort of appear on any of the multitudes of our wonderful friends' podcasts or really interact with them in any way, I just love being like... movie nerds, and then there's me in the background going, yeah, I too like movies. It's great.
It's true, and we do value all of our friends, and we hope to have them on the show more.
They're really wonderful group. It's lovely.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw, but I started a Letterboxd list yesterday called LA is a Sweaty Place, and many of our friends chimed in with sweaty LA movies. So if you ever want to watch a sweaty LA movie, there's now a list on my Letterboxd full of them.
My last contribution, I went out to a bat walk last night, so I didn't look at anything past like 8 o'clock. But my last contribution was California Split, which I think qualifies as a sweaty LA movie, or at least it's grimy. I want to see that on the list anyway. It's beautifully grimy. Elliot Gould and Robert Altman is just that perfect combination of like sleaze. I'm not sure sleaze is the same as grime.
It's not. It's really not.
Anyway, I just wanted to talk about California Split because that's great.
I mean, it's interesting actually in making that list last night because there's a lot of Robert Altman films and there's a lot of Paul Thomas Anderson films and there's a lot of Michael Mann films. You know, there's a sweaty LA type of director, and I appreciate that. And also, California Split, which I've never seen, is Elliot Gould and George Segal. Like, where can I watch this movie?
That's on Prime.
It's on Prime, and it's on Hollywood Suite on demand, so I have 2 ways to watch it. That's
do it. Like young Elliot Gould is just like, I mean, old Elliot Gould was wonderful, but I didn't know anything about Elliot Gould. I worked backwards from Ocean's movies, so that was really the first time I'd seen him in anything. And sort of discovering his talent in various decades is quite the thing. And like him, when we read Marlowe, didn't we? And then we watched a bit of him being Marlowe in one of those, and he's just one of those actors, isn't he? Like that you can't put your finger on. He's just so electric and natural and dangerous. Like he is so like dangerous edges, but still like a big goofy smile. There's a lot of Oscar Isaac has the same kind of quality, I think, and it's just fantastic, really great. Should we just do a podcast on Elliot Gould? That would be great, and then let's talk about the movies.
I mean, yes, we should definitely do that. Mm-hmm. At this point, like, we should just be recording a podcast every day. That's just, we're middle-aged white men. According to the bylaws, we're within our rights to demand that of ourselves.
Yeah. We should find a non-terrible text-to-speech program and just filter our daily text conversations through it and publish that as a podcast. And just so people can really get into the inane crap that is us picking apart movies and games and everything.
It's actually not a terrible idea. Speaking of guest starring on podcasts, I just remembered today, this podcast, you'll be listening to it on Sunday, Awesome Friday on a Sunday, the 14th of August. And my guest shot on Movie Rob Minute, I think, is this coming week. It's either I think it's this coming week, where the Movie Rob Minute's in its 3rd season. It's my friend, Movie Rob, which I don't know if you can tell, but his name is Rob and he likes movies. And this season, the 3rd season, he is watching Die Hard 1 minute at a time. So I joined him from minutes 32 through 37 of that. And it was a lot of fun, and I'm really looking forward to listening back, actually.
I need to listen to that just so I can learn how people can talk about the tiniest details for the longest time.
Yeah,
I
I
feel the
mean,
same about.
I'm in
Sorry,
five episodes of the show, and I think the shortest one is about 40 minutes.
that's crazy.
Yeah.
I feel the same about that podcast you pointed me towards, which is only Mission Impossible, and they're like on episode 200. They've just had Christopher McQuarrie bring Tom Cruise in for the 200th episode where they only talk
Oh
about Mission
yeah,
Impossible.
Light
I
the
need to
Fuse
learn.
cast.
Yeah, I need to learn about how to talk about that. I feel the same way about baseball commentary. To be honest, those old guys that do that are incredible geniuses at just filling space with interesting conversation.
Yeah, I mean,
So
minute by
it's
minute
all right.
podcasts are different because you literally just like fill the time with tangential stuff. Light the Fuse
Mm-hmm.
is interesting because they spend all their time, not all their time, but they like anyone they can get who's even tangentially involved in making those movies gets an invite to be on the show. Like they've had
Right.
production designers and actors and writers, and they've interviewed Chris McQuarrie enough times that on their 200th episode he actually took over like hosting duties for their Zoom call, and that's how they got so many people in. He just kept inviting people into the call. It's actually a really great episode.
Oh, that's
uh,
amazing. Yeah.
I don't know these people, they're not a sponsor, but Light the Fuse podcast episode 200 is a great listen if you have any interest in the Mission Impossible films at all.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Good. So,
Good.
what are we going to talk about on our podcast this week, Andy?
Oh, we're going to talk about two movies as we are wont to do. And we're going to start with this week's shiny new Netflix release, which is the Jamie Foxx and Dave Franco starring Day Shift, which is a movie that we've both seen. And I mean, okay, so basic plot breakdown. Jamie Foxx is a down on his luck divorced dad who has a pool cleaning business, and he's also a vampire hunter. And there's a whole secret union of vampire hunters that have a underground. It's basically like they saw John Wick and went, "Let's do that," but with
Mm-hmm.
vampire hunters. And then it was not very good. I mean, I didn't like it. I didn't really like it, which is a shame. There's not really much more to say about the plot. Like, there's a big bad vampire who has a plan to do a thing in the San Fernando Valley, and she is played by. And actually, to be fair, I thought she was having a good time. Her name is Carla Souza. I don't think I've seen her in anything before, but I understand she's on some TV shows. I can't remember if I've seen her in anything else before, but she seemed to be having a good time um, as the big bad. But her plan is never really fully explained, is it? Did I fall asleep in that
I
part?
mean, beyond, I fell asleep twice in this movie. It took me 3 or 4 days to get through it. I mean, her plan, like everything in this movie, having a vampire reclaim their former glory by becoming a realtor is a really good idea. Like, that's just a really funny idea that realtors and vampirism, there's a lot in common. and
Yeah, and I think her
and
character name, if
by
I remember correctly, I believe her character name is literally Audrey San Fernando. Like she's trying to
right,
reclaim the San Fernando Valley. I
yeah.
think that's, there's, it's interesting. There's a lot of really good ideas in this movie. It's just not very good. I mean, no, correct me if I'm wrong, but
So you're not wrong. And imagine, so this movie exists, as you stated so accurately at the top. This movie is because a film, a action choreographer said, "What if, like, we've crunched some numbers, we've done a consumer survey. This is a consumer survey movie. This is the results of a spreadsheet made into a movie. People like John Wick, and people like vampires." And what if we make a movie that has like acrobatic fight scenes with guns and John Wick style guns, and the whole rest of the movie exists to make people watch these action scenes. So they've just given Jamie Foxx a ton of money, and Snoop Dogg's in it for some reason, and then what they missed out on the point was having anyone competent on any level for any other part of this movie. So what if we make like a snappy buddy action movie with Jamie Foxx and Dave Franco being the odd couple, but we don't have anyone who can actually write interesting dialogue? What if we
Yes.
direct? What if we direct like the any other scenes that are action scenes are really badly directed? What if we had this cool multi-vehicle chase through the city, but we don't have anyone who can understand how to shoot or edit car chases so they have momentum and interest? Like nobody watched George Miller, nobody watched the Wachowskis, nobody who
Nobody,
knew what
nobody
they were
watch,
doing.
nobody watch Bullet. Nobody watch any. To
Yeah.
be fair, I didn't think the car chase was that bad, except for there's one moment in the car chase that I'll come back
Oh,
to in a
it
moment.
was like it was like someone letting the air out of a balloon very slowly. Like it was every shot. There were so many times where they cut to a stupid shot just as the vehicle is doing something like with momentum, and it just took the air out of everything. And then there's three notable fight scenes in this movie, and they're the reason to watch this movie. The best one is in the middle. What if we
Oh yeah,
had
no,
this middle? Okay,
yeah, I was gonna
let me
say
finish
like
because
I have very distinct thoughts about the scene you're about to talk about. So
okay,
yeah,
I just
go
want to talk
ahead.
about. I just want to talk about the brothers because there's a fight in the middle with these two like dude bro brother vampire hunters who turn up and like high five, cool kill bro, who are like genuinely hilarious, like over the top, and they like high five each other, and then they disappear as well. And every other character in this movie is nowhere as interesting as they are, and
Yeah, so this
it's
is my
just like
point. Is that like I get that this movie was made by an action choreographer, a fight choreographer dude, and but I don't get why. I don't know how I'm going to say this without being super mean about it, but
I'll be mean.
I
Let
I
it out.
don't. I think that Jamie Foxx and Dave Franco are reasonably good together, but there's the writing is so bad. Like Dave
Mhm.
Franco's character is meant to be a coward, and the reason and like he has like a recurring thing he does, and in most movies it would be
Oh
like
god.
vomiting, and in this movie he pees his pants. It's just
And that's
so
the thing.
it's
Oh.
so juvenile and bad. But then in the middle of the movie, they bring in Scott Adkins and Steve Howie to have like a great action scene from a much better movie. Like I want to see the movie about these brothers. I want to see
Yes.
the Scott
Yes.
Adkins Steve Howie movie because Scott Adkins and Steve Howie are both great at this. And the reason that the this middle fight scene is so good is that it's the only one where the camera pulls back and the director goes, "Well, we have Scott Adkins. Let's just point a camera at him and see what happens." You
Who
know,
is he?
it's
Where have I seen him in stuff before? Because I didn't recognize him.
yes, you've seen him
Is-
in a ton of stuff. He shows up in big movies like this one to be in the best action scene. He's in one of the best fights in the first Doctor Strange, for example. But he also has like an industry of like B-level movies where he's an action superstar. He's like this generation's Jean Claude Van Damme if Jean Claude Van Damme had never become an A-lister, basically. He's so like he's in a ton of movies and not all of them are good, but he is great, and he is
Mhm,
always great.
mhm.
And he's preeminent martial artist. He's super good. I don't know that I've seen Steve Howie in too many things. We just
Mhm.
double check that before I check myself before I wreck myself
Wreck
here.
yourself.
Um, but similarly, great action presence. So yeah, Steve Howie was in Dead or Alive, like he and Stan Hill. Like he's been in a bunch of like bad action movies where you watch them because the action is good and the movie's
Mhm.
bad. And this wants to be. If this had wanted to be that, it might have been more fun. But it wanted to be a good prestige movie with good, and it's just not that at all. It's not. It doesn't have the writing. It doesn't have the direction. And I think what little bit of it are is saved is entirely because I think Jamie Foxx and Dave Franco in particular are very charismatic people on screen. And it's hard to say I had a terrible time watching them specifically, but I had a not good time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I begrudge every minute of my life I wasted on this movie because it was a Excel spreadsheet of what our consumers want, and the it was lit and directed like an Arrowverse episode. It was just awful to look at, and it didn't have like I'm very interested in what's going on with movies at the moment. When movies are made for the small screen, and especially on Netflix, like there's something about why do Netflix movies, for the most part, always look so cheap and like overlit, and there's no style to any of it. What this movie needed was a Sam Raimi or a Scott Derrickson or an Edgar Wright to add a bit of humor to or deftness or cheekiness to the whole thing, because the whole thing is completely devoid of any like character or humor at all. God, the Snoop Dogg edition is so like teeth grindingly just there so they can appeal to that demographic. Like it doesn't add or do anything. I like Snoop Dogg a lot. I think he's just being Snoop Dogg with a gun in this, and
I'm honestly,
like
I was
there's no
fine
point
with
there.
Snoop Dogg. I was fine. Like I think you obviously disliked this movie more than me.
Yeah,
Um,
it's terrible.
uh, but I thought that like lots of people were having a good time and there was lots of good ideas and all of which was put together terribly. And I'm sorry, uh, first time director JJ Perry. I don't get it. I don't get it. I don't get it.
No,
I
it's
don't.
awful.
I don't think it was very good. And I think that honestly, though, the writers of this movie, who I think one of them's written a bunch of stuff. Um, Shay Hatton has writing credits on like um, Army of Thieves, which we watched. I think we both liked most for the most part, and Army of the Dead and John Wick 3, and the upcoming John Wicks 4 and 5, and the other guy Tyler Tice, I believe his name is. He only has this, and I feel like if this script had felt like something other than a pretty good first draft, it might have been saved a little bit. But this movie felt the writing, all the dialogue, all of the
Terrible.
jokes felt like a first draft, and I didn't like it. And what few
Absolutely.
moments where I did actually laugh or even just smirk were all just because of the way that, mostly honestly, because of the way that Dave Franco delivers lines. Because I think he's really good at playing the, for lack of a better term, a little bitch type character. Like,
But,
and that's not a
like,
slight. That's hard. That's a hard kind of character to pull off. And to have it be like likable, and he's really good at it. And I think Jamie Foxx is super charismatic, and I don't think he didn't bring everything he wanted to this role. But when you don't have, the dialogue, some of the
yeah,
performances are
sadly.
terrible. Though I feel like
Yeah.
there's definitely a lot of scenes where, and I don't want to single anyone else out because I don't really want to be that mean, but like, there's definitely some scenes where I watched and I was like, okay, so why didn't you do another take? Like, you're almost there. Like, I'm not a director, but I feel like you're like, there's so many scenes where I'm like, you're almost there. Just like do it one
Yeah,
more time. Just do it one more
I
time. You know?
I I thought the antagonist was awful. I'm not sure it's the actress's fault. I'm more willing to put it onto the script, and the script uh
Honestly, I thought she
was
seemed to be
good. There's
having
more.
a good time with
No,
what she was given,
almost
and
personality free. I completely disagree about her. Like almost without any kind of impact or personality for me. Like in this kind of
maybe she.
movie, you need a bit of a scene to it as an antagonist. Just
Yeah,
didn't
and
feel like
again,
it.
I guess maybe I thought she was doing the best she could with the material she was given,
Uh,
and and maybe like I thought that. I mean, if I'm going to focus on someone who is bad, it would be there's two supporting characters in particular who I thought were just uniformly awful, who I will not single out. Which I'll tell you after who I thought they were, but I just thought that they
mhm,
were. I thought they were. I don't think it's necessarily their fault. I think that but I
mhm.
also think that their performances were bad, and I don't.
Yeah.
Anyway.
It's an incredibly lazy movie, and it's not just the writing; it's the direction and the editing as well. And there's a couple of moments where one person explains that person. I don't. I'm going to spoil something, but it doesn't matter because it doesn't matter. There's a scene where, like, oh, the old woman you killed, that was her daughter. The next scene is the antagonist talking about that I had a daughter once. Like, it's saying the same information twice, and then later on, Jamie Foxx and Snoop Dogg have this thing where Jamie Foxx says just like old times, and then literally 30 seconds later, Snoop Dogg goes just like old times. at the
Yeah.
that caps a scene. It's so lazy. The whole thing is so lazy and so badly put together. It's a waste of time to even. I don't know. I don't know how I feel if this is just a Netflix thing or if it just felt so uninspired. The whole thing. It was just a pitch and for the fighting. It was a stunt choreographer probably wrote the script as well, and it was just awful. And you're right. I want to see the brothers. I want to see these goofy dude like alpha males who are actually. I think you were meant to hate them pretty early on, but they were so charismatic and fun during the fight. And at the end of the fight, they're all fist bumping and like congratulating each other. It was just really lovely. I'd
Well,
watch a
and they're
whole
just,
film with them being dude bros.
and I don't mean to throw any shade at Jamie Foxx, who's a great actor, or Dave Franco, who's a great actor, but in that fight scene, which involves the two, Scott Adkins and Steve Howe, and Jamie Foxx and Dave Franco, two of those people are such wonderful, gifted physical performers that they
Mm-hmm.
definitely outshine the people who
Mm-hmm.
are supposed to be the leads of the movie, right? Like, I definitely want to see,
Mm-hmm.
like, if I guess if you're gonna have a stunt guy make a movie, you should have a stunt guy star in the movie. You know,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
like I feel like what was the Extraction was the Chris Hemsworth one,
Mm-hmm.
and I feel like
Mm-hmm.
Chris Hemsworth is definitely doing more of the work when it comes to the stunts and fights in that movie than Jamie Foxx is. And to be fair,
Yeah.
Dave Franco's not meant to be doing the work. He's like that's his character.
No.
He's a coward
No.
right up until he's a super ninja at the end.
With like a story beat that is completely out of nowhere, that doesn't make any sense whatsoever, that has not been referred to before, to do with vampire evolution, which is just stupid. It's like watching a really bad video game cutscene from the early 90s. That level of like sense and quality. It was awful.
Yeah,
Ugh.
yeah, and there's like one again. The other supporting character, the one who there's another supporting character who like lives in the building who like from the first time you see her you're like oh she's a plant from the vampires
Yeah, yeah, of
and
course, yeah.
and I think that you know uh Natasha what's her name Natasha Louis Liu um what is her
Hmm.
name Bordizo
Yeah,
she has been good in stuff she's been bad in
yeah,
stuff
she has.
too her debut was in that awful Crouching Tiger sequel and like but nobody was like not even
Hmm.
Michelle Yeoh and Donnie Yen were really good in that movie um
Hmm.
but like from the first moment she shows up, you're like, oh, she's a plant from the vampires, and then they give you a scene that makes that explicit, and then they try and play it
Hmm.
like a twist later. Like it doesn't make any
Yeah, it doesn't at all.
sense. And then she immediately is like, well, I don't want to be the bad guy, so I'll be a good guy with you, and then switches sides like immediately with no coercion.
Stupid. No,
And it's
and
it's
she.
all just like, yeah, like it's just all straight A to B filmmaking writing, and it's
Oh,
not good.
she's playing Sabine Wren in the Ahsoka TV show.
Yeah, and I'm very much looking forward to that.
Right. Yeah. Instead of watching Day Shift, she's also in Guns Akimbo, which everybody should watch. Go and watch Guns Akimbo instead of this piece of shit because she's in that. She's great in that, and that is an infinitely better movie than this is.
Yeah,
If you
and
want to
like
watch
Meg,
Sorry, carry on.
I was gonna say, and Megan Good is in this too, and she's also, a good, fun actress, and she's kind of wasted in this.
Yeah.
Um, but she'll be in. She was in Shazam, and she will be in Shazam too. So we'll get that.
Mm-hmm.
That's fine.
Yeah, yeah. So, how many stars are you giving Day Shift?
Uh, I imagine you're. I'm gonna guess here that Swami says Simon gives it a 1 because that's the minimum, right?
I was I was coming into this before we started recording. I was hovering maybe two for the because some of the action work, especially that middle fight with the brothers, is pretty cool. But no, talking about it as a whole, I resent the life I wasted watching this movie. So it's a 1 star for me.
Yeah, I'm gonna give it 2 based on the strength of Dave Franco almost entirely, but that's just like very barely a 2 for me.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I do feel like he deserved better than this.
Mm-hmm.
But I just him and I guess Jamie Foxx as well are so charismatic that I don't feel my time was entirely wasted. And based on again the one scene with Scott Adkins and Steve Howe, like just honestly, yeah, honestly, watch this movie, but just fast forward to that scene.
Mm-hmm.
just
Yeah,
just watch that scene. That
absolutely.
scene is great.
Yeah,
That scene
yeah.
is great. Um, yeah, so
So
2. I'll give it a 2.
I need to go through. Wow, Scott Atkins' filmography is quite the thing, isn't it? I need to
Yeah,
go through and see if I can.
he actually has a podcast as well that's pretty fun to listen to. Podcast or
Oh,
YouTube
cool.
show, I can't remember which.
Wow, he's in lots of things called Legacy of Lies and Dead Reckoning and Max Cloud, straight to video. That's
Yeah,
always a good sign. This is the kind of stuff. At one point in my life, I watched a lot of direct-to-video martial arts movies, like a lot, and this looks like the kind of thing that would take me back to that stage in my life.
yeah, it would. And like again, he shows up in just tons of big movies to do like the best action scene, like this movie. He shows up in tons of like debate movies of debatable quality to be in the best action scene in the second act, and then just
Mm-hmm.
disappear.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Oh, cool.
so yeah, that's Day Shift. Watch it at your own
Yes.
peril,
No, don't. Like
basically.
what? Literally watch anything else.
No, just again, just watch the Scott Adkins scene. It's great, and he
Mm-hmm.
disappears from the film after that point,
Yeah,
and
just oh my god, that's right. I mean, you think like, oh, they're friends now, like because they're kind of rivals for about 30 seconds until they decide to work together. It's another really lazy part of the movie. They build them as rivals, and suddenly they're best buddies. And so, like, oh, okay, so maybe they're gonna form this like squad. They kind of got a squad forming, and then they're just
then they
like,
just
bye,
disappear. Yeah,
see ya. That's it. We're all gone
yeah.
now. Oh,
Yeah. Well, anyway,
stupid.
let's move on because we're starting to get mean about it.
I don't know, this film deserves like it deserves it.
Yeah.
I have no interest in being mean, but this film deserved it. Let's talk about our second movie.
Yes. Let's talk about our second movie, which is well, how to lead into this movie. Basically, in the movie Fall, which we're about to speak about, two young women climb a
Mm-hmm.
tower and get trapped at the top of it. And
Yeah,
that's the whole movie.
that's it.
And it's
Uh,
kind of great.
it's great. I gotta tell you though, my some of my favorite genres are bottle movies, plucky female protagonists working through horrific circumstances to awesomely win, and situational horror. So those three circles combined, and the middle of those three circles is this movie. And like, I'm not really scared of heights, but I felt physically sick for a chunk of this movie, and I just watched it on my TV in the dark. Like, I'm actually thinking of trying to see it in theaters because I wanna see it. I want to be completely immersed in it.
Yeah, I will say that if you're like me and you do have a fear of heights, just be prepared for that fact because there are definitely moments. And
Oh
interestingly,
boy.
though, the scenes that get me the most. There's one in the trailer that is like the scene where the ladder falls away. They're at the top of this 2,000 foot TV tower, and as they try to climb, the ladder falls away. And in the trailer, that scene made me feel like sick. And then we watched the movie. That scene didn't, but that's because immediately prior to it, there's a scene where a character like purposefully for the gram like hangs off the edge of the tower, and the camera
Yeah.
looks straight down at her, and I was just like I had to like look away. And I was just watching it with my wife at home on our TV in the dark, and it was very effective. Um, but I have as a very tall person, have an ironic, I feel, fear of heights, and this movie definitely trips that fear a number of times. Um, but in the end, like it's sort of weird to say that just these two girls being trapped on top of a tower is the whole movie, but that
Mhm,
is pretty much the whole movie. And like there is some
mhm,
emotional circumstances to their being there. You know, one of them was married and her husband died on a previous climb, so this is allowing her to like overcome her
mhm,
fears and get her life back together. And then there's some revelations about the relationships between the three of them. And I will say there's two sort of major reveals in the movie, and I thought they were both handled really well.
mhm.
Um, and I thought that both of the young women who are in this film um, did a really great job. Uh,
Yeah.
Grace Carolyn Curry and Virginia Gardner are both very compelling on screen. I don't know that I've seen Virginia Gardner in anything else, but Grace Carolyn Curry, or apparently she's sometimes credited as Grace Fulton. you would have seen if you've seen Shazam, which hopefully you've seen because it is the best
Mhm.
DC movie so far. Um, but yeah, it's one of those. It's kind of. I mean, the joke right now is that like it's the same producers as 47 Meters Down, so you could just call it 47 Meters Up. And there's a lot of similarities between these two movies. Um, but
Uh-huh.
like it's a really good version of that kind of movie.
Yeah, it's this kind of movie absolutely hinges on the performance of the actors, their emotional, because the fear that they're trapped in is always symbolic. It's got to be symbolic for something, and that
Yeah.
emotional core is dependent on the actors delivering it without being over the top, but like being like in them. And I thought Grace Fulton did a really incredible job of portraying the fear she has and the guilt and the regret and the suffering, the mental suffering she's going through for the horrific thing that happened a year ago. I thought the filmmakers and her really portrayed that emotional core really, really well. So it made her journey up this pole more thrilling because you understood what she was going through. Virginia Gardner as well played the this like Instagram hottie really well, but also allowed the story did something really clever and introduced this element of it being a fake character, and there was a big difference between her real person and her fake person, and I thought that was a really interesting aspect as well. But the when you're stuck in a place like this reminded me of Descent, actually, except it was just the other direction, and without the creature horror. And phone booth as well. When you're trapped in a place, it also depends on that wonderful, slow um, examination of how they're going to get out of it and how they use their ingenuity and resources to get out of it. And if
Hmm.
that feels kind of un unreal, or if it feels like undeserved, it can kind of break that whole stress. And I thought the slow levels of them like trying to save themselves,
Yeah.
the things they went through, I thought was all done really, really well, and
Yeah.
really it wasn't rushed, and it was really believable.
Yeah, it's the kind of thing where if it feels in any way disingenuous, it can kind of ruin the movie, right? And like
Yeah, totally.
whether that is in the performances, which in this case, no, they were both great,
Hmm.
or if it's just in the writing, like if they happen to have a bag and the bag has exactly the things they need to survive, you know,
Yeah.
um, in but it or like it has exactly the things they need to survive in the way those things are intended to be used, like they don't have to like MacGyver anything. Then yeah,
Mm,
the movie's gonna have nothing. And this movie, they definitely do have to MacGyver their way out of the situation, and I felt that it was handled really well. Um,
mhm,
and I think it does a really good job of, especially toward the end. I do think there's a bit of a sag in the middle or towards the end of the second act, but by the time it
mhm,
gets to the point where they're desperate at the end, where they've been stuck for too long, and they
mhm,
really like. There's a
mhm,
moment, the moment where you might think maybe they won't get out of this. I thought that whole section
yeah.
was really well. Basically, my thoughts are that the first section of the movie is really good, and the last section of the movie is really good, and there's a bit of a sag in the middle.
So I don't disagree, but for me, the slower middle part really worked because it I don't know. It just didn't feel rushed. I think for them to be stuck somewhere for a long time, you've got to kind of
Yeah,
portray that somehow without making the audience bored as well. And to have them sort of sleep their way through and sort of have these conversations whilst being stuck and whilst not really knowing what to do. I always enjoy that instead of rushing to the next solution or attempted solution. And it kind of for me made me feel their isolation a bit more.
yeah, and I would say like definitely, I mentioned that there's two sort of major reveals in the movie, and they're both handled, I thought, really well.
Mm,
Um, and the scenes in which they happen are important and engaging, and definitely come in moments that are otherwise sagging for me. And not
mhm.
because there's a lack of action, but just because there's a lack of sort of anything. There's sort of like I agree that there needs to be moments of like stillness and silence to really make it clear how long they've been in the place. And by the end of the movie, they've been there for a solid couple of days. Um, but also, I felt that there was maybe a bit much of that at times. But it's art is subjective. So what are you gonna do? And then again,
It,
the scenes where they're just sitting and talking are again they're great and important to the film. So yeah, it's
uh,
I mean I'm picking at nits here is what I'm doing, right? Like I'm not I'm trying to find things to talk. It's hard to talk about this movie because all the parts that I want to talk about are spoilers, and all the parts that
mhm,
I want to rip apart aren't that interesting. So,
mhm.
like they're not even
I
like they're not bad. They're just disinteresting to talk about. So as it's this movie's in theaters right now, and I think you should go see it. That's my
Yeah, you
that's
should
my review.
absolutely go
Go
see
see
it.
the movie.
You should go see it, especially if you've got mild like fear of heights or even a strong fear of heights. Like this is something you should put yourself through. Absolutely. And I actually really loved. I think Jeffrey Dean Morgan's a good actor anyway, but he's got a tiny part in this, but he's so good at making that tiny part feel substantial. And honestly, as a father with a daughter, any kind of female character who has like a falling out with a dad and then tries to make up and like dad, you know, trying to get help from the dad, that's going to trigger my emotional response like quicker than anything else. So I really like that aspect too. And the there is a couple of twists, and the biggest twist
I
is
don't I
quite a
don't
risk. It's
I don't,
quite a
I don't think
risk.
I don't think you should talk about them at all. I think that
Oh,
like the
okay,
cold. I would say that
okay,
the colder you go into those moments, the more effective that they will
sure,
be. And I
okay.
feel I feel kind of bad even saying that there are two major reveals, but because like I feel like in knowing that they're coming might actually make them not as effective. So
Maybe, yeah. And
especially because
yeah, yeah.
I think the way this that and now I'm just doing it anyway, but I think that the way the first one is handled impacts the and I need a thesaurus, but the way the first one is handled impacts the impact of the second one.
Mhm.
Um, and
It's just
it's
a really well-made movie and well written. Like compared to Day Shift, like the writing of Fall really fits together. Like everything fits together. The emotional core, the revelations, the situation, the solution, the what they do to get through parts of this. Like it just fits together like a puzzle in that really satisfying kind of way where everything works together. And obviously they're not really stuck up a pole, but it's also graded really really well that it looks like they're up there. It doesn't look like obvious CG, and
I mean
I was happy for that as well.
it never doesn't feel like they're up there for sure. And there's
Yeah.
definitely moments where like, and I get that they're both meant to be like experienced climbers, and one of them is like an Instagram daredevil climber person. But there's definitely moments
Mhm.
where they're just standing on top of this pole, and I'm like, why aren't they tethered to something? Why aren't they tethered to something? Why aren't they holding
It's more your
something?
fear.
There's wind, man. There's wind. Like so, yeah. If you have a fear of
do,
heights, this movie's going to definitely trigger that for you.
Do you know what? I also love it when filmmakers keep discovering that ballerinas have incredible athleticism and physical acting abilities.
Hmm.
And they found this out with Alicia Vikander, and they found this out with Grace Fulton as well. And she is so physically in this movie, and she uses her whole body to really, really portrays her struggles, her highs and her lows. And she's wonderful. She's absolutely wonderful in that she completely like she is the core of this movie for me, and I think the the way it's written and the way she very subtly sort of carries her grief and sorrow and fear into this film is a major part of why it works. Really impressed
Hmm.
with her.
Yep, I agree. So, what are you gonna give it out of five, Simon?
I
I'll tell you what.
want to see
I'll
if
start this
I want
up
to
at
see if
like
what are you going with?
I am going with. I think it just barely creeps into four territory for me.
Ooh, interesting. Barely creeps into four. Is that
Yeah.
because you were scared of it though?
No,
I
no.
mean,
I just it's just like I love this kind of movie. I think there's definitely better examples of this kind of movie.
mhm.
Um, but the parts that didn't, there are a few parts that didn't really work for me, like I said.
Mhm.
And I think this is the kind of movie that, if we had half stars in our scale, would probably be a 3.5. But I'm willing to say it's a
Mhm.
4, not a high
Yeah.
3.
Okay, and I'm just ahead of you. It's a really high, solid 4 for me, and it just doesn't like the way that Prey felt like a 5. This doesn't feel like a 5, and it's not any sort of comment on its quality because I loved it, and I think I am going to go and watch it in the theater. I am going to pay money to go and see it again, and it really worked for me. It's a really solid high 4. It's a 4.5 if they existed, but it's a high 4 for me.
Right. Good.
Excellent.
Good, good. Well, that's 2 movies, one of which you should fast forward through to get to the good scene, and one of which you should definitely see when you get your chance.
Yes. And
Um,
try and see it in theaters.
yeah. We will be back in a week to talk about more stuff. Not 100% sure what that will entirely be, but most likely, I believe She-Hulk is next
Mm.
week.
Yeah, we've just got some access to that, so that'll be
Yeah,
interesting.
so we'll be talking about the first few episodes of She-Hulk and something else. And you'll have to tune in to find out what. Um, uh, that's pretty much the show. Do you have anything else you want to bring up,
No,
Simon, before we take off for the day?
we're going to finish up there because I just want to say happy anniversary to you and your good lady wife. And
Oh,
how many
thank you.
years have you? How many years have you been married for now?
6 now. Yes.
I
It
will
is.
say
It is the.
to.
It is the sugar anniversary, which is, if anyone who knows my wife and her love of candy,
Oh,
it's a very
oh my
appropriate
God, that's a
anniversary.
good one. I will say it's the only wedding I've ever been to, and probably ever will go to, that where a Klingon Bathleth. Come on,
But
Star Trek nerd.
are you talking about when my
The
now
the
brother-in-law
big the
led,
brother, yes,
like, recited the story of the first Klingon hearts and presented
yes,
us with a batleth? Yes.
yes. Like no other wedding has that, and I feel like it should be written into law because it really added a certain je ne sais quoi to the whole proceedings. So
You mean the
that's my
part where he led the entire crowd into the traditional Klingon blessing of a wedding? That was pretty great.
was pretty great, and other weddings seem quite boring in comparison. So I have very happy memories of that night, and that's right up there. So, but
Yeah,
enjoy, and
good.
thank you everyone for
Anyway,
listening. And
yes,
we'll see you next week.
that's after that extra banter. I just want to say one thing. I was looking at my notes for the movies that I took while we were watching them, and I did forget to mention that if you are going to watch um, Day Shift, just be aware that this director has also discovered drones. And I gotta say, it must suck for every other director in the world to have discovered drones the same year that Michael Bay did. But that's anyway. That is the show for this week. Thank you so much for listening. We appreciate each and every one of you. If you like what you've heard, please consider giving us a 5-star review on your podcasting platform of choice. We're on all of them. Um, if you'd like to support us more directly, we do have a Patreon and a Ko-fi, both linked in the show notes. I'll link to my sweaty LA list in the show notes as well, so you can watch those movies or make suggestions. We record this here on the unceded lands of the Musqueams, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish Nations here in Vancouver, BC. I have been Matthew. He has been Simon. And thank you so much for joining us on this awesome Friday.
Bye.